When a hammer strikes a nail, nature is forced into utility. This modern logic dictates that the world be mapped, formatted, and put to work. Operating within this framework, G.W.F. Hegel delivered a famous provocation. He declared that art, in an era where human consciousness is dedicated to transforming reality through action, is a thing of the past. Historical materialism formalized this tension. It argues human value and ultimate emancipation are achieved exclusively through concrete, measurable work, leaving no room for aesthetic contemplation. Within this system, a self-contained poem is a passive luxury. The manifesto, however, is an active necessity, a text designed to force political change. Consider Das Kapital. This text functions as an ideological tool, engineered specifically for political utility and the alteration of global history. This creates a paradox. If reality is defined by action, art appears as a failed tool. It builds nothing and changes nothing. In a world governed entirely by rational planning, art faces an ultimatum. It must justify itself as a political instrument or accept its own complete obsolescence. Maurice Blanchot offers a different perspective. He proposes art deliberately occupies a radically different ontological zone, a separate state of existence from the world of tools. We can map this concept as a dual-axis topology. The upper hemisphere represents the world, the domain of action, utility, and linear progress. It is governed by efficiency, where every object in action possesses a specific function aimed at a useful end. Conversely, the lower realm operates as a reversed world. Down here, existence is defined by excess, boundlessness, and a total lack of utility. Blanchot argues that art belongs entirely to this lower realm, actively resisting the upward pull toward illumination and usefulness. To understand this, we must discard the usual metrics of efficiency, historical impact, or clarity. The artwork demands to be judged by its own internal laws. Blanchot calls this sovereign entity the work, in Turkish, yapıt. It exists suspended between these realms, pledging allegiance only to its own structural logic. This space of literature confronts the deep structural impossibility that underpins all human action. Examine an everyday tool, like a machine part or a coin. When we use it, its physical materiality, the heavy metal, the rough edge, is ignored. It disappears into its function. A tool only becomes visible to our conscious minds when it breaks. A snapped gear forces us to look at the jagged metal itself, simply because it is no longer useful. The artwork does the opposite. It forces its own material substrate out of the background and into our direct awareness. This architecture reveals the elemental weight of stone, pulling its raw reality out from behind its function as a shelter. In painting, the medium itself, the viscosity of color and the behavior of light, exists independently of the scene it depicts. The poem strips words of their communicative utility, revealing the raw sound, rhythm, and weight of language itself. The true artist submits to this material revelation, rather than using the material to express a subjective inner emotion. The material in an artwork is never consumed like fuel in an engine. It is affirmed in its pure, stationary, and silent existence. This refusal to be consumed isolates the artwork from the human economy of mass production and historical progress. While tools conquer nature by rendering it invisible, the artwork protects the elemental earth by bringing its raw, useless matter to the forefront of human perception. Cultural myths like the romantic genius suggest that an artwork is merely a vessel for a creator's subjective inner life. Blanchot argues instead for absolute autonomy. Once the work reaches its true form, the author's biography and intentions become irrelevant. Stéphane Mallarmé described this as the impersonal volume, recognizing that the highest form of the poem exists entirely independent of the person who penned it. In this framework, the artist does not master the work. Rather, the artist is erased by the work's absolute demand to exist. Instead of pushing intent into a canvas, visualize the work as a dominant node, pushing author and reader to the periphery. Facing the autonomous work, both occupy the exact same position of exile. The creator has no special authority over the object produced. True creation is an act of profound self-negation. The creator must die so the work can speak. If the artist is stripped of mastery and authorship, what is their actual function? Their function requires surgun, or exile. The artist is deliberately banished from the Cartesian world of clear logic and measurable power. This exile is an entrance into error and wandering, where linear progress is impossible and no outcomes can be guaranteed. To truly create, the artist must intentionally step away from illuminated, rigid paths and drift into a dark, formless void. Rainer Maria Rilke viewed the myth of Orpheus as the ultimate philosophical metaphor for this dangerous artistic descent into the dark. Rilke identifies a paradox in this descent. He writes that the artist must always be dead in Eurydice in order to capture the essence of the work. This Orphic death constitutes the absolute surrender of the I, the abandonment of Cartesian certainty, and the relinquishing of control over reality. Art is dangerous because it requires the artist to abandon historical usefulness and exist in the terrifying space of pure impossibility. Friedrich Hölderlin called our current historical moment the time of destitution, an era defined by the absence of absolute truths and gods. In this time, the world is optimized for utility and the relentless, mechanical march of history. Having nothing left to represent in a world of utility, the artwork turns inward, searching solely for its own essence. Historical time moves like an arrow, but the time of the artwork operates as a perpetual, non-linear beginning situated beneath the timeline. Historical time constantly attempts to absorb the artwork, trying to turn it into a consumable cultural object or a museum piece. The true essence of the work resists this, constantly dropping back to its static origin point in the outside. To an efficiency-obsessed mind, this repetitive, non-productive re-beginning appears as an error or a failure. Yet this is the central paradox. The absolute uselessness of the artwork is precisely what guarantees its survival against the machinery of progress. It cannot be consumed because it refuses to be used. Art persists because it is the only human endeavor that fiercely guards the outside. By refusing to be useful, it asks the unanswerable questions that prevent the totality of history from closing in on itself.